Hey guys, Andrew Henderson from nomadcapitalist.com here in Kuala Lumpur. And it is official as of January 1st, 2018. This month, what has been talked about in our community, in the offshore world, in the second passport, in the international tax space, is now finally and fully implemented. And that is that if you're a US citizen, and you have a tax debt that the IRS deems substantial, they can turn off your passport and or refuse to issue you a passport. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you owe $50,000 or more in federal income tax, the IRS now has the ability to get in touch with the State Department, send your information over, say, hey, this guy owes us a lot of money, and they can deny to issue you a passport. If that happens, you're going to have 90 days to correct the issue, as I understand. And if you can't, then you're not going to be traveling. If you have a current passport, they're also going to have the option and the ability to turn that off. And it's a bit unclear as to exactly how that's going to work and what those procedures are. But the bottom line is $50,000 in tax debt that is unresolved is going to be an issue for you being able to get a passport, a U.S. passport, and you're being able to travel. Offers in compromise, payment arrangements, settlements, stuff like that, will not necessarily be a substantial issue. So if you're on a payment plan to the IRS and they're cool with that, then you should be cool. But if you just rack up a $50,000 tax bill, you're gonna have a problem. Now, is this as egregious as some people are saying? Well, certainly. Even the United Nations said people should have the freedom to travel. And when we start putting conditions on that travel, it makes it a bit murky and a bit weird. There are other countries, such as Australia, that say, hey, if you're bankrupt, we're going to limit your ability to travel. So this is not the first of its kind. As much as people want to make the United States out to be like the worst thing of all time, certainly there are a lot of restrictions for US citizens, especially those living abroad, paying tax, stuff like that. But this is not entirely out of left field. Where it is troubling is, obviously, if you're a larger income earner, there could be a discrepancy where you're going to end up owing, they think you owe, $50,000 more than you think you owe, and that could become an issue. Now, again, there's that 3-month grace period where things potentially could be worked out. The process for how things could be worked out in terms of a dispute seems a little bureaucratic. They even mentioned the U.S. tax court system and how that could be an issue, or that could be part of the resolution process, and that doesn't sound like much fun. So I see this as a potential issue for two types of people, and that is one, obviously people who are just not compliant, which we don't recommend here. You want to be compliant. I do think that there's a possibility that people who have not filed returns, either willingly or willfully or not willfully, because they've been living overseas, the IRS may go back and create returns on your behalf and say you owe some money and you might have a problem. So if you're not compliant, again, whether you are just a tax scofflaw or because you just didn't know you have to file, I would definitely contact someone and get compliant. The other issue is people who have large enough incomes, or they're selling businesses or stuff like that, where they have the potential to where $50,000 tax debt could be an issue. I've talked before about how one day I woke up many years ago. I had a business in Arizona, and the state of California, where I had spent a couple months the year before doing some actual business on the ground, came in and just took some money from my account. And even my lawyer said, well, that's not really legal. They can't, Arizona bank account, Arizona company, they can't really do that, but the bank allowed them to, so they could, legal or not. And it took me a while, I don't even remember how long, to actually convince them, guys, that fee that you claimed I never paid, here's the canceled check. I did pay you. And you know how much fun it can be dealing with the tax man, especially when you're not paying them. When it's, hey, you owe me my money back, you made a mistake, they're not very responsive, especially in California. You've got to call and wait on hold for hours on end and send them stuff, and then they lose it, then you got to talk to this guy and that guy, and it takes a long time to resolve. So there was an issue where I was in the right, and that wasn't $50,000, it was like $800 franchise tax fee plus some penalties that they thought I owed. And we finally resolved it, got the money back, and it was all fine. But imagine that you have that case and you're doing business on a larger level, or yours is not just a franchise tax fee, yours is a dispute over something else, and someone makes a mistake. Is that 90 days enough to correct it? Now, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're living in the United States, you're required to use your U.S. passport to come and go. So this idea that people think they can get a second passport and just live in the United States and avoid all these U.S. regulations, it's a little silly. Having a second passport is always a good idea, but if you're living overseas, I think it's especially good. Now, again, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to suggest that just don't pay your taxes or just become someone who does things illegally and then just get a second passport to cover it up. I'm not saying that at all. Obviously, what we do at Nomad Capitalist is fully about compliance, following the rules, following the law. If you owe money, pay it. If you don't want to be in the U.S. tax system, there's one way to get out of it very easily. But having a second passport is going to be important, I think, because this is just the latest in a slew of regulations. To me, it's not necessarily about this regulation. U.S. tax compliance, if you know the right people, it's not that difficult, even if you're overseas. It's just the latest thing to be aware of. It's just the latest burden. It's just the latest mindset from them, from the government, which is just, hey, we're in control. And they are in control, and do understand that. They control your passport. It is not your property. I have one of my passports. You open it up, plain language. This passport belongs to name of the country. It's not yours. They control it. It's a privilege, like a driver's license. So do be aware of that. Do be aware of the mindset shift. Do be aware if you haven't been filing taxes. You should be doing that anyway, because it's going to come back to haunt you. But this is just the latest thing they can do to you. It's now in force, fully in force. And what was once kind of a conspiracy theory is now the law and the administrative law of the land. So do be aware of that. If you want to find out more about the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle, you can subscribe here on YouTube. Click the subscribe button, and of course, nomadcapitalist.com for so many more resources.